For some background, I live in the California foothills. My parents and I moved into this house from the city in late 2017, after it had been sitting empty for over a year. The day that we moved in, my mother and I arrived first to clean while my father and brother drove the moving truck. Right off the bat, I was uneasy, but I tried to write it off. The property felt heavy. That's the only way I can think to describe it. Some people have the feeling of being watched inside of their homes, but I had that feeling anytime I stepped outside. We were going to sweep and mop the floors and dust the baseboards and windowsills when I started to notice this white granular powder all along the baseboards and the windowsills and the doorways. I immediately told my mother, who told me not to worry about it and to sweep it up. By the time I had swept up every room and cleaned off the windowsills, I was certain that it was salt, and a lot of it. But I thought it was fine. Whatever. The people that lived here before were superstitious. I could live with that. We unpacked the truck over the next week. I was setting up my room when the next bizarre events started to happen. I started to hear knocking on the windows. Always quick raps that sounded like someone was knocking with their knuckles. It would happen often on all the windows in the house, but only when you would turn. No one else would be there. You'd go outside, and no one would be around the house. Things like this only escalated. My brother and I would take our dogs for walks around the property. They were older, small dogs who were always good-natured and calm, except for when they were outside at this new house. They would growl, puff out, and get extremely agitated. They hated being outside at the new house. Then we started finding the animal carcasses. They were always small creatures, rats, toads, bats. The biggest we ever found was a raccoon. The animals had been gutted, a single deliberate line down their torso, starting at their chest and ending near their rear. They never had any internal organs left. They looked practically mummified, almost like something had sucked the fluid, blood, and organs right out of them. It was one of the most bizarre and brutal things I had ever seen. My brother would always stay up late in his room on his computer every night. He liked to game with his friends until early in the morning hours. He doesn't spook easy, but on more than one occasion I would wake up to him shaking me awake, terrified. He would tell me that something massive on two legs was walking around right outside of his bedroom window, which he would leave open at night. He said it would walk right up to his bedroom window and stop, and when he would look towards the sound, he could hear it scrambling away. I never saw it with my own eyes, and neither did he, but the motion lights outside would be activated every single time, leading to the woods near the back of our property. I know what you're probably thinking. Everything up to this point can be explained away rationally. It could be some crazy person living in the woods, or some neighbor trying to mess with us for whatever reason. That was what I told myself too, so I could sleep a bit easier at night. But then the banging started. It was loud, and it sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. The walls would literally vibrate, picture frames rattling right off the walls. It was like something massive, stronger than any person, was pounding on the exterior walls of the house, always late at night, and always in more places than just one. I could never pinpoint the source directly. My brother and I would stumble out of our bedroom petrified, and my mom would take us to her room, where we would stay the rest of the night after that. My dad would walk the perimeter of our property with his gun, but he never found anything. No footprints, no people, nothing. This went on for probably 6 months, and every time a major event would happen, my dad would walk the perimeters with his rifle and would come back with nothing. We felt like we were going insane. Then, one day, it suddenly just stopped. The mutilated animals stopped appearing. I stopped feeling like I was being watched every time I went outside. My dog stopped being on edge all the time. The property itself just seemed to be lighter, like it finally took a deep breath after holding it for so long. I genuinely have no explanation, or even a clue as to what that creature, being, or entity was. I'm just glad that it seems to have moved on. This happened to me when I was 13. I had always struggled with hallucinations. I had been called a lot of things in school, but the people in my neighborhood were usually always kind. My two friends, Slade and Renee, were always there to comfort me when I had panic attacks and when I was seeing people who weren't really there. We lived in a small neighborhood where not a lot of crime or anything like that happened. When it did, the news of it would always spread like wildfire. One night, Renee, Slade, my sister, some of the younger neighbors, and I decided to play hide and seek. Renee agreed to stay close to me, so if I had any bad hallucinations, she would be there. It's worth mentioning that anytime I had a hallucination, whatever I saw would be distorted. It was about 9 p.m., so it was pitch black. I hadn't had any hallucinations all day, so I wasn't really feeling all that worried. We had been playing hide and seek for about an hour, and nothing had happened yet. When the game was finished, we tried to find the two youngest of our group, but we couldn't find them. We were starting to get really concerned, so we called out for them. There was no answer. I started to feel genuinely worried. Renee and I went to check the backyard. We looked around at the bushes and trees, when suddenly I spotted something. I saw a man peeking his head out through the trees. He held out his hand and whispered, "Come on." He slowly started to walk up towards me. I told Renee that we needed to go. We left, and later we found the kids hiding in the bushes. We told them to go inside, and the older kids, which was me, Renee, and Slade, were going to go talk about what I saw. Just then, I looked down the road and held my breath as I saw a skinny black figure in full detail ducking behind my trash can. I then noticed distortions around it and was able to discern it as a hallucination. At this point in my life, I liked to investigate my hallucinations to gather scary stories about them. I liked to relay the stories to my friends because I believed it made me look tough. I told Slade and Renee to follow me. I described what I saw, but only to Slade, because Renee was a bit younger and I didn't want to scare her. As we walked down there, wanting to confront whatever I was seeing, Renee and Slade thought I was just being me again. Midway through the walk, I gave up and turned around, and I told them to start walking back up to the house. Then, suddenly, Renee jumped back and then froze and started to tear up. She was staring directly behind me. It was as though she was refusing to blink. I shook her suddenly to try and snap her out of it, but then I turned around and I saw that thing. This time, I could see its face. I froze when I saw it. It had a hole in the temple of its head. It was about as tall as I was. It then suddenly bolted down the street and out of sight. I turned back to Renee and asked her what she had just seen. She described the tall, skinny black figure in perfect detail. The scary part is that I didn't tell her what I had seen on account of her being too young. There was no way she could have known what I saw unless she saw it too. But it doesn't end there. After that, we all went home. I came home to see my mom anointing the house. It's a rare thing we do, unless someone has an extremely paranormal experience. I asked her why she was doing it, and she told me that the two relatives that had been staying with us were experiencing strange occurrences. She told me that one of them had been having sleep paralysis. I asked if she had seen anything, and my mother nodded. She told me that in her sleep paralysis, my relative had seen a tall, black, skinny figure looking to be almost starved. I later asked my relative if there had been anything wrong with its head, and she said yes. She said that the man had a weird hole in the temple of his head. Years later, when I turned 15, I learned that there was a man who lived there who was on watch by the FBI and had shot himself in his head in his backyard. I asked to see a photo of the man, and a couple of days later, my mother found one. I broke down into tears as I recognized the face of the man. He was definitely the figure that I had seen, and the hole that was in his temple, that was where he had shot himself. I'm just glad I haven't had to worry about him since. So I saw this at work about 4 years ago, and it still creeps me out to this day. I work for a digital surveillance company that runs the eye in the sky for thousands of restaurants, bars, and gas stations across the United States. From time to time, we get calls for investigations to look into robberies, theft, etc. One day we got a call from a popular fast food chain located in the heart of Detroit. They said that an employee OD'd by the dumpster, and they needed us to get some answers on the situation. The first question they had was what happened and how long had he been there. The second question is where it starts to get a little weird. See, the dumpster had a brick wall around it, and it had two entrances to the dumpster. One was a gate that you had to pass when you walked out the back door, and the other were big gates that gave garbage trucks access to the dumpster to empty it out. They claimed that the big gates were always open, and that the small gate by the back door was locked from the inside. The weird thing is that when the body was found, the gate that was never open was open, and the body was sitting there on full display, so they wanted to know who had opened the gate. So we downloaded the footage. One night, the employee went outside, threw out the trash, and you could kind of see him through the locked gate that was never open. The way the camera was angled, you could kind of see over the top also. He injected himself, slumped over, and keeled over dead behind the dumpster. He was out there for 2.5 days. No employees ever came to look for him. It was pouring rain both days. For 2 days, employees would come and go taking out the trash and not see him. Then, on the 3rd day, in the morning sunshine, clear as day, the gate just slowly opened by itself. Nobody came and nobody went. The gate just opened on its own, and the body was sitting there in the same position it was 2.5 days earlier. I literally felt chills run down my spine. To this day, I can't explain it without thinking it was paranormal. A couple of hours later, an employee walked out with a trash bag, saw the body, freaked out and called the police. I didn't end up writing the report, but whoever did ended up having to write a report on how a gate apparently opened itself.